very much. Well, our next speaker is Tim Hoeffner with the Michigan Department of Transportation. I remember many years ago trying to figure out how to get into the job of helping bring passenger trains to the Midwest. And Tim was very kind and spent about a half hour on the phone explaining to me the strategy in Michigan and gave me a lot of background that was very helpful. He's also been very, very good at getting things done with very little resources given to him by the legislature and making sure things continue to move forward. And that's why I'm very excited to hear more about what's going to be, what the progress is on the Chicago to Detroit corridor. Thank you, Tim.
No. Good morning. Okay, so you noticed we've probably been doing a few things up here. It's not on?
That's just for them to pick up.
Oh, okay. I need both of them? Well, you probably noticed that we've been scrambling over here, and I just realized the presentation we finally got up is not the right presentation. So, we're going to. First of all, happy April Fool's Day, everyone. I guess the joke's on me. I think really the joke's on you because you're listening to me. So with that, what I'd like to do is, can you hand me my eye surface there, and I'll try to follow what, and we won't look at the pictures on the screen there, and I do apologize for that. I don't know if it's our technology or if it is the interface between, one second here. There we go. As was mentioned, I'm the director of the Office of Rail for the Michigan Department of Transportation. I also serve as Governor Snyder's designee to the Midwest Interstate Passenger Rail Commission, at which I am currently serving as chair. I want to talk a little bit about the commission because it is the largest compact that we have, and we are a congressionally authorized compact of 9 states. And what we have are 4 members from each member state, 1 from each legislative body, a private sector appointee by the governor, and the governor or the governor's designee. And in the case of Michigan, I'm the designee. And where we're focused on is promoting and supporting and developing and delivering the intercity passenger rail services throughout the Midwest states. The thing is we've all talked about the MWRRI, the Midwest Rail Initiative, for many, many years, which I was at the original meeting out at O'Hare Airport, surprisingly, that was orchestrated by, at that time, Governor Thompson of Wisconsin. And, those were the technical DOT folks. The Compact Commission is really the legislative bodies. So what we do is we generally go to Washington once a year, and a couple of other occasions. I did testify in front of Congress a year ago, February, on intercity passenger rail items. And so we try to support politically the activities that are going on in the states. The stuff that's happening in Michigan right now, and talk a little bit about that because it really does tie together in so many ways with what this group is about and what the Midwest Rail Initiative is about and what MIPRC is about. Because what we've seen over the years is a migration to even closer relationships between the DOTs and our sister states. And sometimes I've actually made comments to our CEO, our director, Kirk Steidel, that we work more closely, my staff on the passenger side work more closely with their counterparts, particularly in Illinois, Wisconsin, and Missouri, and a lesser extent Indiana, than they do with their highway brethren within the department. And when you look at it, because we have a network of services that Amtrak operates as a hub out of Chicago for us, it really is important. And you hear talking about all of the level of frequency and everything, but the connectivity and all that is important. And we try to work on that. We're even taking things a little bit step further. I think that everyone's aware with the equipment procurement and that's taken it to a new level. If we would not have done the groundwork that we did in the early 90s, mid 90s of the MWRRI, I would say we would not be looking at the Siemens Charger locomotives showing up very shortly. Because we have that relationship, because we understand what everybody's doing, what everybody's system plan and everything is, it was a really easy call. I remember when George Weber from IDOT called and asked if we wanted to participate in a joint application that they were going to put in for new equipment for the Midwest. Do you want to be part of it? I just want to let you know it's bi-level equipment. My response was, let me think about it. Yes. I didn't necessarily really want bi-level equipment. I didn't know where the journey was going and all of this, but we knew that the single most important thing that we could do to improve the services in the Midwest was not to increase the reliability, not to increase the frequencies, to decrease the travel times, not to improve the reliabilities, but was to show what the services could be. And that is through the equipment. The equipment, in my opinion, really defined the services. It is, when you get on the Delta plane, that's Delta. When you arrive at Detroit Metro, that is not Delta. It's when you get on that plane. And so that's where the experience really starts. What we do in Michigan, we look at the stations as the gateways to and from the community. And we work very closely with the community, but that is the community's public face. So with the many station projects that we've had in the last few years, we may have received the federal grant, but the project has been delivered at the local level. And that provides ownership for the local elected officials for that community, for that facility. If you look at the deployment of stations that we have in Michigan, I think that we've done fairly good job on that. There's a couple more that we will work on. Obviously, Detroit, we actually are working with the city of Detroit on developing a new RFP for a new facility that will go along with the light rail queue line that will be opening up on May 12th, I'm sorry. So as far as what we have going on the infrastructure side, many of you are aware that we purchased 135 miles of Norfolk Southern Main Line. The vast majority of the infrastructure, track structure work was completed last year. We will not have at this point what we called a summer schedule last year, where we had reduced truncated trains, reduced services. The remainder of the work, we really focus on the ITCS, the train control installation. We've transferred the dispatching for the vast majority of the line from Kalamazoo all the way to Ypsilanti east of Ann Arbor to Amtrak, and Amtrak is currently dispatching those trains. When we finish the system safety plan, the last segment from Ypsilanti on into Dearborn, approximately a little less than 20 miles, will be dispatch will be transferred hopefully within the next few months. I don't know how many of you listened to the president's tweet last week when he made a comment on Ford making an investment. And Ford announced that they were putting a 1.4 whatever billion dollars into their facilities. About 800 million of that is going into a facility that is owned by to a major production facility that is served by rail by Norfolk Southern, that's owned by the state of Michigan. When we made that conscious decision to acquire the Norfolk Southern line, it was very much for passenger operations. It was also for the economic decisions to ensure quality service to the businesses and industries that have built in Michigan over the years. So the new Ford Ranger and the new Bronco will be built at a facility that's served by Norfolk Southern off of a line owned by the state of Michigan, as well as a line served by CSX. Henry Ford knew the advantage of competition and made sure that his major production facilities, such as the Michigan Assembly, were jointly served. The other piece, as I mentioned, the Charger locomotives, there is one on Amtrak's property. There's a significant number of them that are soon to be arriving, and we're going through the final phases, steps, and should say Illinois is on the commissioning process with Amtrak and working with our fleet manager for the Midwest on those aspects of it. One of the things, just in case you're not familiar, but we have 3 Amtrak services in Michigan: the Pierre Marquette, Grand Rapids, Chicago, the Blue Water, Port Huron, Chicago, and the Pontiac, Detroit, Wolverine, with 3 round trips on the Wolverine, single round trip on the other services. Our ridership revenue have dipped a little bit in the last 2 years, really because of major construction going on and the reduced summer schedules that I mentioned. But if you look at it for a 10-year period, going back roughly 12, 13 years, our ridership on those services have doubled. And we have made no significant improvements in the service. We didn't add any frequencies. We didn't do anything. But more important in this day and age is that, our ridership increased 50%. More importantly, what we did is we doubled our revenue. So while we were growing ridership and growing ridership by 50%, we increased the revenue by 100%. We think there's an awful lot of untapped potential there. Now, some of it, and this was also in a time of going through the recession. This was also in a time of fluctuating gas prices. And one of the things when everybody's talking, and Mark, I've known Mark for many years, and really I thought that was a great presentation. But one of the other factors that you have to take into consideration is it's $46 a night to park in this town right now. Thank you for the Chicago administration for privatizing parking. I think it will do worlds of good for alternative transportations. I mentioned the new facility in Detroit, and for those of you who haven't been in Detroit in recent time, it is not the Detroit that you remember. It's not the Detroit that you heard about so much in the news for the last few years. There actually is a shortage of housing in the downtown core. Parking is becoming a problem, and parking prices are raising significantly, not quite to the level of Chicago yet. And for the first time in a long, long time, the quasi-private public Detroit Economic Growth Corporation, which was the kind of the development arm of the city, may be working themselves out of a business because one of their primary functions were to take and provide alternative financing and opportunities for developers because the real estate values could not sustain commercial real estate financing, and that's now changing. So I think that we have an awful lot of benefits going on that way. When we, in Michigan, look at our services, we look as much to the east as we do to the west, because if you look at Michigan from a US map, we are a very much peninsula state with everything having to go south, either through Indiana, Wisconsin, or Ohio to get anywhere else in the country. But if you look at it in a more global perspective, in a North American perspective, and the freight flows with our US largest trading partner, Canada, we are the epicenter. Roughly 60% of all of the commercial trade with the US's largest trading partner flows across one of the 3 major international border crossings in Michigan: the Sioux, Port Huron, Sarnia, and Detroit Windsor gateways. So we have a major effort that goes on for a new highway bridge, new roadway bridge, but also we have discussions with particularly Canadian Pacific and the Ontario Municipal Employees Investment Group that owns the first international subaqueal rail tunnel that is in Detroit and over 100 years old on replacement of that for freight and for passenger opportunities there. So we look as much to Toronto as we do Chicago. When you look at the air network that we have in the Midwest, particularly with Chicago, Detroit, and Minneapolis hubs, we really have the luxury of some very good opportunities. And how do we do those intermodal connections? That's always been the connections that we've had to figure out. But the region is really blessed with very fantastic air service as well as the opportunity for rail service, and we need to take and strengthen those connections. I do apologize for the technical errors. I really don't think this is most of the things that I was hoping to touch on. I think a couple of more that are important. I would be remiss if I didn't thank particularly our partners at the Indiana Department of Transportation for the Indiana Gateway and for IDOT for the Inglewood flyover and the equipment. If I had my presentation up, there was a slide I got from Amtrak that showed the 6 or 8 major components of the Indiana Gateway project and what that has done for the minutes of delay on all of the passenger trains coming into Chicago from the south. It is just a very dramatic curve that drops off. It's kind of leveled off now with the majority of those improvements in place, and also with the downturn in the energy market on the freight rail side. I mean, I look at it as that from the energy standpoint, not just coal, not just crude by rail, but also frac sand, and those are. It's amazing with that downturn what other things can happen on the railroad system. All of a sudden the fluidity comes up. There's miles of intermodal train parked out in Colorado in the high plains because it's not needed, not because the volume on intermodal is down, but because the fluidity is back into the network. So there are some huge opportunities. And I know that there's some difficulties going on. And it's with the financial situation, we all talk about the money and all of that, and where is it going to come from, and what other countries and everything have invested. And it is really tough. It's really tough for our legislators these days to make these decisions. I had a slide. One of my opening slides was a picture, and it's like you have to be the eternal optimist to work in public transportation. It ain't easy. I've told the director and the other senior leaders from MDOT, anybody can do that highway crap, because there's 100 of them. And they kind of agree with me because it's like, you want to take my job, guys, you can do it any time. But that is what makes us stronger. And this country does have to come to grips with how we're going to fund not just our rail infrastructure, but all of our infrastructure. We are, seriously underinvesting, and we need to solve that problem. The programmatic EIS service development plan for the Detroit-Chicago corridor is another example of the states partnering very well. Who would have ever thought that Michigan would be leading a study to take and come up with the new access in Indiana and Illinois to Union Station, a dedicated passenger access for Indiana, in Indiana and Illinois. That project that is wrapping up. It's under the final reviews for the Federal Railroad Administration. If those haven't caught on, there's been a change in the administration, so there's a little bit of delays and some things happening, but we anticipate that they'll be issuing that document for final comment in probably more of the fall time frame. So the thing is, there are huge opportunities out there. And, it's interesting to hear talk about setting up a commission for 220 mile an hour, truly high-speed operations, and I do applaud that. And sometimes Rick and I go round and around, and you know, it's not that from the state standpoints we don't support those type things, but the problem is we don't have the luxury as government entities to be as visionary as groups like you are. We have to be a little bit more pragmatic to be able to maneuver ourselves through the fiscal realities of our country, our states, our local municipalities, and the legislative processes that we have. You know, I look at it, you know, you don't want to melt the wax on your wings by flying too close to the sun and crash and burn. So we are a little bit more conservative on that nature. We try not to do things that will preclude us from being able to do what you want to do for the long time and can actually build towards it. But I would suggest that the best thing that we can do right now is to have the projects that are going forward in the Midwest be successful and have the ridership and the revenue, particularly for our legislators these days, continue to grow, and for us to be able to continue to work with Amtrak to figure out ways to reduce our costs. Let's get a couple of successes under our belt. Let's get a couple of these that are more the envy around the world and around or the country. And then we can go back and say, okay, what do we do next? And we move forward on those type of truly high-speed operations. I guess with that, I'll kind of shut up and open it to questions if anyone would like.
You could use you can use the podium to answer questions.
You see the, you see the legislatures that you're working with more and more recognizing the value of rail, or is it still a us versus them thing?
Yeah, I really do. You know, the old battle, and I'm going to speak more generic about public transportation as compared to highway, road, and bridge. You know, it's no longer a fight of transportation for last resort. Even some of the most conservative legislators at state and federal level understand the economic opportunity, the economic engine that good quality public transportation provides. Anytime you can aggregate a large number of people, it provides opportunity for the private sector. And they understand that intercity rail, high-speed rail, commuter rail, transit systems can do that. Excuse me. So I think that's a huge victory. The issue is, how do you pay for it? You know, these are not small numbers. You can go out there on highway, road, and bridge projects, and you can take and repair the joints. You can take and build new bridges. You can resurface segments of your system. And you can do that on the rail side, but you've got to really, to see the true benefits and the return, the ROIs that everybody's looking for, you've got to invest huge dollars. And that's just very difficult these days.
Can you comment on the Grand Rapids to Detroit line that's been proposed?
The coast-to-coast study. The Michigan Environmental Council, with a grant from the department, some federal funds, did a short study called the Coast-to-Coast to run trains. We had a legislation boilerplate that said that we will study intercity passenger rail between Holland, Grand Rapids, Lansing, and Detroit. And we worked with the Michigan Environmental Council. They did the study, and we've got it. And I've had some conversations with them. It's like, okay, excuse me, what's the next steps? And we're continuing to talk with them on what those are. So.
Yeah. I twice rode the International from here to Toronto, and I really miss that train. And one of the prospects of bringing back service from Chicago through Michigan, or even if nothing else, if we don't get the international back, at least providing a good shuttle service between Detroit and Windsor, so that people can have a way of getting from here to Toronto mostly by train. You might have to take a taxi under the Detroit River, but what's going on with that, if anything?
Well, actually, MARP has been promoting that rubber tire connection between Detroit and Windsor now, and you know the Via Rail and goes to not Windsor but Walkerville, and the Detroit station. It's just the schedules just are not conducive with it. I mean, we are very supportive of international service and connections. I was the guy that pulled the plug on the international. I did not know it was going to turn out and nearly have a doubling of the ridership from where we were then. But until we fix our borders, until CBSA and CBP, and we can come up with ways that we can add clarity to the amount of time it's going to take to clear the borders, it's very difficult. Now, we have had some progress with that, particularly with the legislation that's going to allow for, I don't know if you call it, I always get them mixed up, if it's pre-clearance or if it's reverse inspection at Montreal and Billy Bishop Airport, and I think allowed for about a dozen other places or up in Canada. That works very well, and Vancouver works very well, but you only have one stop in Canada. We can't do that between Detroit and Windsor. There's too many there's London, there's too many, Stratford, there's too many other population centers that we need to stop there. So it is important. It is something we'd like to do, and it is on our radar screen, and we do talk with our sister agencies at the province and the Canadian federal government and work on that. In fact, I'll put a plug in, April 24th, 5th, 6th, there is the 3rd annual Great Lakes Forum. There is the Council of the Great Lakes Governors and Premiers, which are the legislative, the government body, and there is the private sector counterpart, which is the Great Lakes Forum. They are holding their 3rd annual meeting in Detroit. The first one was here 2 years ago in Chicago. Last year it was in Toronto. This year it's in Detroit. So if anybody's interested in that, please go out on the web and look for it. But it is important.
Tim, I know there's plans in the future to increase frequencies on Chicago, Detroit, once everything's completed on the upgrades. It seems to me that also Chicago, Lansing, at least, and Chicago, Grand Rapids kind of cry out for additional frequencies. So are there any plans for that in the works, or any thoughts about it?
Well, we obviously would like to increase frequencies everywhere, and I think going on to what Mark said about adding the additional frequencies is not the cost of starting a train from whole cloth. We're still reeling from the present that Congress gave us in Section 209, and then didn't fund the sister section of it that gave us the capital funding. If it wasn't for government, I wouldn't have a job. I had to walk into the administration and tell them that the 8 to 9 million we're paying Amtrak for these services today is going to go up to 25 to 30 million, and oh, by the way, there is no significant improvement in quality. So there are some opportunities, I think, that we've got working on the pike. You heard about the Charger locomotives. We get new equipment out there. We can get the travel time reductions because of the improvements that we're making on the Michigan line. That then we get better equipment utilization, as Mark talked about, and we get better crew utilization. And then we can start to look at adding frequencies or partial frequencies and things like that. But I'm in a survival mode right now, guys. I am not looking at adding frequencies without any significant new sources of revenue. I mean, the pot of money that we get funded out of is believed by the Michigan the Michigan transit industry, the transit systems. We fund transit in Michigan at the state level. We provide operating assistance, the same money that I get for the Amtrak operations, and there's a big need on our transit side too. So it's a very tough decision for the legislatures on every year. And I just don't see adding them right now as in the cards.
You're obviously constrained by passenger equipment, and you've alluded to the bi-level corridor. Is there any good news?
No. Next question. Did you say?
Actually, I had the same question. I'm a constituent from Oxford, halfway between Lapeer and Pontiac. So
Yep.
no news is bad news. Okay.
On the high-speed rail corridor, we still have a mile not in the high-speed corridor where it's a freight railroad. I've heard unhappy news about trying to come to terms with them on rerouting the lakeshore and some other things. Can you comment on that?
Well, one of the things that we had been talking with Amtrak operations particularly on was that could get a long distance train from Michigan. I mean, Illinois. I mean, you guys, you don't understand the luxury that you have here, with all the long distance trains emanating and everything out here, all the long distance service, several long distance services heading downstate, plus all the money that you put into the state supported routes. But for the state of Michigan, we would have no Amtrak service. We do not have any basic system trains. With what the administration's federal budget just came out with, you guys may be joining us, unfortunately. Yeah.
With the improvements being made to the Wolverine line coming to conclusion, is this going to be done this year? And if so, when can we expect a reduction in running time?
I told the director November 15th.
Of 17.
Of 17, yeah. That we'll have we'll have the PTC in operational, and then we can start to work on those on reducing schedules and reducing travel times. I'm not going to say we're going to make that deadline, but that's what I've put out there.
Thanks. I got a question. I'm from Wisconsin, and as you know, Wisconsin turned down the high-speed rail federal money a few years ago. I often get the perception that other states like Michigan and other states in the Midwest, passenger rail development or expansion doesn't seem to be so polarized as partisanship like we have in Wisconsin. And I'm wondering what might contribute to some states like Michigan maybe being a little more forward.
I'm going back to my Greek mythology analogy. I remember having conversations with my boss back in the 90s, who was a gubernatorial appointee, and we made the conscious decision to keep going forward, but keep the program low profile. It's probably cost us a lot of money. Probably has cost us a significant amount of money. Probably would had the opportunity to be far, far more ahead of where we are today. But I think we've managed to our risk. I mean, you really talk about I really appreciate you guys today going south with, finally thought we had the slide fixed and then I had the wrong one. I'm going to blame it on the Russians. Because a lot of the new security measures we have on our computers, we have like a million hacks a day, attempted hacks a day on the state network. So we've got some pretty sophisticated encryption software and all of that. I'm going to blame this on operator error. Yeah.
You got some of the prettiest beaches in western Michigan, in the whole Midwest. And to go from Chicago to those beaches on a Friday between Memorial Day and Labor Day is a traffic nightmare.
Ride the Pierre Marquette and take it to New Buffalo. You can walk to the beach, ride the Pierre Marquette. You can take it to St. Joe, have a great pizza, who's Congressman Upton's favorite pizza parlor, and walk across the grade crossing and you're at the beach.
How often does that run?
daily. One round trip a day. You get there in the evenings, have a wonderful dinner, spend the night. You can spend the whole day at the beach. You can spend the whole week at the beach and take the PR Marquette back in the morning.
Any, could it be realistic that they could add just in the summertime, between Friday and Sunday, like 5 trains a day going to the city?
I'd like to announce we're going to start that service in 30 days. You've got to be in the river or the lake at that time.
Thank you.
We'd love to increase frequencies, but the financial horsepower is just not there.
Related to potential increase in frequency of trains from Chicago to downtown Detroit, do you ever see at any point in the future the restoration of what I think it's called the Union Station, the main transportation hub of Detroit? This is off of Michigan Avenue out west of downtown Detroit with the high-rise office above it. Do you ever see that coming back and being a viable facility?
Michigan Central Depot, we've had discussions, the current owners of Michigan Central Depot, I've had discussions with them. They're obviously looking at redevelopment. It has windows and a roof now. That's a major step. They need a tenant. What we have said is that would be key. Introduction of service back to there would be key on international service. So with that, are we done?
Excellent. Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken.